Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Motor City Mad Mouth Show. Yes, I am at the Motor City Mad Mouth, and I am very pleased to be joined by a special guest, longtime friend, a guy that I wish the Dodgers were still in Vero Beach, but they're in Arizona. But nevertheless, the only way you do it these days is by doing it this way, live streaming. And I am pleased to be welcomed by former Vice President and General Manager of the LA Dodgers, Fred Clare. Thanks for being on with us tonight, Fred.
Scott, great to be with you and your followers.
Well, we're glad to have you. Walter Mitchell from the 313. Thanks for being in here with us. We have a loaded show tonight. We're going to talk about Fred's book, and we're going to lead off with that topic, and we encourage participation in the chat room. So, Fred, you just recently wrote a book called Extra Innings, Journey to the City of Hope and Finding a World Championship Team. Why don't you give everybody an overview, Fred, what that book is about?
I will be happy to, Scott, and thank you. Scott mentioned the book is Extra Innings, Fred Clare's Journey to City Hope and Finding the World Championship Team. And the evolution of that book and the meaning of that book and all the funds from that book do go to City Hope. But in 2016, I had tremendous pain in my face and went through a number of CAT scans, MRIs, and ultimately discovered that a Mohs procedure that I'd had on my lip, the doctor did not get the margins and the cancer was running up my jawbone. Okay. So I now at this was 8 years ago. And when that happened, and I experienced the great people at the City of Hope, as so many of us will, through hospitals, cancer centers, throughout the United States, indeed throughout the world. But when I saw this great group of people, doctors, staff, volunteers, I wanted to tell the story of City of Hope. And so City of Hope made arrangements with a wonderful writer. The author is a man by the name of Tim Madigan, great writer. And so the book, Scott, really is about the City of Hope. And in the years that I've been going to City of Hope, I've just been so impressed. I wanted to try to help Cheryl, my wife, and I. We had 2 celebrity golf tournaments. We raised $500,000. And call attention to City of Hope through the book. So thank you for asking.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hey, listen, you know something? When you're doing something for a good cause and you've benefited by it, why in my right mind would I not give you the opportunity to talk about it? As I understand, did you tell me that it's available on Amazon? Is that correct?
It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. So people can find it online. And again, all the net proceeds go to City of Hope. So, and this is it's a time, Scott, this really came from the sun. And part of the book is really letting the reader tune in to the doctors and the staff at City of Hope, because we need to protect ourselves at all times in all the things that we do. So it's very, very important.
Oh, when you talk about sun, I mean, you're in LA, I'm in Florida, and a lot of people are in the sun. So,
a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you get it all year round in every place, but we get it predominantly in the warmer climates for sure. All right, so you know what, Fred, we're going to have a little bit of fun tonight, like we already have. We're going to play the name game. I'm going to list some names, and you just tell me give me 1 or 2 sentences to describe them, unless you feel you want to describe a little bit more. Start off with Roy Campanella.
Roy Campanella, a dear friend, one of the most courageous people that I ever met in my life. And I was so honored to have a friendship with Roy and Roxy. And I absolutely thought the world of him. And people don't know this. I'll add one other thing that's kind of interesting.
What's that?
When I took over the Dodgers as general manager in '87, we went into the spring of 1988. And I remember calling a meeting where we would meet in Dodger Town, would be in all places in the Roy Campanella room.
Right.
So here are Tommy, the coaches, the scouts. we've got to make a decision because I brought in Rick Dempsey, who's a master player. He's been with us all spring. Now we've got Alex Trevino, who has a guaranteed contract. And so, as I did on most decisions, I went around the room. I wanted their thoughts. And when I got to Roy, I'll never forget it. He said, "Fred, you really don't have a tough decision to make here." He said, "Rick Dempsey is your man." And he gave me his comparison between Dempsey and Trevino. Who could make that judgment better than Roy Campanella? And who catches the last pitch of the 1988 World Series? Rick Dempsey, the player that Roy recommended. So a friendship unforgettable.
Great story. Don't worry, they get better. All right, let's talk about the obvious guy, Tommy Lasorda. My first major interview, met him at the 1981 baseball winter meetings. I have my stories, but I want to hear yours. You're the one that worked with the guy and knew him for a long time.
Well, when I thought the world of Tommy, we had a long, amazing relationship. I won't go into the story here, Scott, but I first met Tommy in the spring of 1969.
Okay.
I was a relatively young writer. Tommy was the manager of Spokane. And due to a challenge that he gave to me, I played shortstop for his Spokane team in a game at Dodgertown against the Bakersfield Club. So we spent a lot of time together that spring. And the friendship developed that lasted, of course, for 30 years. And when we had one of our tournaments for City of Hope, Tommy was there and accepted the Celebration of Life Award. So legendary. You can't say Dodgers without thinking of Tommy.
Yeah, he was Dodger Blue in every sense of the word. I mean, he lived it, breathed it, and everything. All right, next one's a tough one. Vin Scully.
Vin Scully, I was happy to contribute to a book that's just out, Perfect Eloquence, a book on Vinny by Tom Hofrath. And he was absolutely one of the kindest, most sincere, really a spiritual way about Vinny. It was always about helping others. It was about his kindness and a friendship that is embedded in my heart and soul.
I'll say one thing about Vin Scully. Every time I tried to get to Vero Beach, I missed him by a week. My goodness, he would come in for 1 week, and that was a weekend I missed him. You know what? I'll tell you what, every time he was always one of my favorite announcers. Of course, I always be a little bit partial toward Ernie Harwell because he's obviously my neck of the woods of Detroit, and he's a mentor of mine, but I love Vin Scully and everything about him. And when I went to the Southern California Sports Broadcasters Association, I went to a banquet over there, hoping he'd show up there. Yeah, he showed up all right by video. I always seem to miss Vin, but you know what? Everything about Vin Scully lives in my mind and my heart, and I definitely don't have no doubt.
A legion of fans, a truly, truly all-time great, as we all know, in the sportscasting field. And I miss him. We talked often. There's seldom a day that goes by that something doesn't happen where I don't think of any.
Well, there's no question he's the greatest broadcaster of all time. I don't care what town you live in. You can't appreciate Vin Scully, then you can't appreciate the art of broadcasting. That's for sure. All right, Jackie Robinson.
So happy that you mentioned that name, Scott, because Jackie Robinson and being with Jackie was absolutely the most memorable part of my 30 years with the Dodgers.
Okay.
And there's absolutely nothing close to that. And there were two incidents where I had the chance to be with Jackie in 1972 when we first retired uniform numbers in June of 72. No Dodger number had ever been retired.
Right.
That day, we retired the numbers of Jackie, Roy Campanella, and Sandy Koufax.
Okay.
Later that year, in October of 1972 at the World Series in Cincinnati, I was there with Jackie, Don Newcomb, Peter O'Malley, and others who were close to Jackie. And I'll never forget this, Scott. He had been invited by the commissioner, Bowie Kuhn, to throw out the first pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I will if you give me a chance to speak. And it's all there on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie's talk that day, his speech that day, he said, baseball has made progress, Jackie said in a very polite way, but I will not be happy until I see a black man in the third base coaching box, meaning as the manager. Jackie died 9 days later. He was not in good health. He had diabetes in a very serious way. And his memory, in fact, when we had our golf tournaments for City Hope, where we gave the award 1 year to Tommy, 1 year to Rod Carew, I wanted that Celebration of Life trophy for only one reason. And this is the most important thing I'll say in this interview, Scott.
Okay.
Nothing will come close to this. On that trophy are the words of Jackie Robinson. And those words are, a life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. That was Jackie, always about helping others, never concerned about himself. And so I use those words a lot. And the reason I use them, Jackie's words, have to do with someone who's been a cancer patient like thousands and millions of others. When I walk into City of Hope and I see the impact that hospitals and other great causes and entities make on the lives of other people, I think of Jackie, I think of his quote. So it's embedded in my mind and it's embedded in my soul.
Well, one thing I like to do every now and then is I go to Daytona Beach and go to Jackie Robinson Ballpark. I don't know if you've been there, but it's pretty neat how they have a good history up there in Daytona Beach for the Daytona Tortugas, and they do a really good job honoring his memory there. Well, you brought up Sandy Koufax. Now you get to talk about him. So go ahead. What a great segue, Fred. I swear, my goodness. Maybe we should get in the booth sometime. And I'll be the play-by-play and you'll be the color guy. Go ahead.
Sandy, the word for Sandy, perfectionist. That was Sandy as what he strives for in his life, and he was a incredible player, pitcher. He was an incredible teammate. You ask anyone who ever played with Sandy, Sandy never forgets his teammates. It's very special to him, and it's it's a wonderful memory to have a friendship with Sandy.
Okay, we know, rightfully so, that Jackie Robinson's retired throughout Major League Baseball. I don't think there's a player more worthy of it than him. But a question that I tend to get asked a lot, Fred, is should Roberto Clemente have his number retired universally like Jackie Robinson? Good evening, George.
I certainly would be an advocate of that. And then someone might say, where do you draw the line? Well, you draw the line as history gives us the people who have earned certain areas, a certain status. And Roberto, when you think about the life of Roberto Clemente,
right,
how he lived it, and I've been honored to know more about Roberto through a great friendship with Manny Mota and others. But when you think about Roberto, and you think about Jackie's own quote, Life is not important. How did Roberto lose his life
Right.
in helping others? And I'll tell you one thing. I have no way to know, but the first person that would probably advocate Roberto having his number retired would be Jackie. They are indeed in their own way, and so many similarities, uh, but greatness personified.
Well, okay, let's go to the chat room. Getting some activity there now, Brett. Okay. Walter Mitchell, yes, Clemente should without a doubt. Okay, Walter Mitchell, again, look at how prevalent the number 24 on Latin ball players. Okay. And then, of course, we can't forget by George Eichhorn. Sandy used to call the NBC Saturday TV Game of the Week with Jim Simpson. I also had an opportunity to go out there and meet Sandy Koufax at the Florida State League All-Star Game back in 1985 at Osceola, Florida, and he signed a little thing like a little placement. It was kind of neat, actually, that he did. And yes, Roberto Clemente was a gem. So I am curious. So, what are your thoughts about Joe Davis as a current broadcaster for the Dodgers? He's from the Metro Detroit area. I met him actually a few years ago, and Joe Davis to me, you couldn't ask for a guy to probably pass the torch to. Obviously he could have had the Tigers job if he wanted to, but he elected to go to LA. And my dealings with Joe have been nothing short of pleasant.
Well, I think that Joe's reputation here in Los Angeles, and I guess in the baseball world, is very good, and extremely good. And I know he partners with a dear friend who I think offers great insights to the game as he's able to with his great career,
Right.
and that's Oral Hershiser.
Right.
So I think that broadcasting to me in some ways is more difficult as far as that baseball broadcaster reaching into that legendary atmosphere, because the games are delivered in so many different ways and there are so many different voices. So we don't have what we once had in terms of one announcer being identified with one team year after year and decade after decade. But the Dodgers seem to do a good job with the people that they have, and of course, I don't think anyone offers any better insights in the game, certainly from a pitching standpoint, than Orville does.
Okay, Fred, let's go back to 1988, and I think you know exactly where I'm going from it. I don't have as good a home run call as Jack Buck or Vin Scully, but if I ever got an opportunity, I think I have a pretty good one, but I won't say it tonight. Kirk Gibson's home run in 1988. His only at bat against the Oakland A's. I know you built the crux of that championship team anyways, but let's talk about that moment, okay? You've had a lot of great moments in Dodgers history, dating back to the Brooklyn Dodgers all the way to the LA Dodgers. But when you think about Kirk Gibson coming out from one at bat during an entire series, practically can't even walk. Tell me what was going through your mind, not only when you signed Kirk Gibson, but that moment there that will never be erased in time. Kirk Gibson.
Well, as history now shows us, it was a moment meant for Kirk. And I know one thing in knowing Kirk very well and remaining close friends since his Dodger days. Kirk always realized moments, opportunities. I think he saw that when he came to the Dodgers and saw the team, and he certainly did a lot to help to create an attitude that existed. But the story is so incredible. It would be fiction if it wasn't true. But that's who Kirk was in everything that he does. What you know is that he's going to be ready for any moment. He may fail, he may succeed.
Right.
But he will realize the moment, be ready for the moment, And in this one time, as history shows, he created one of the great moments, as you say, Scott, in Dodger history.
Yeah, they always say everything made in Hollywood. Well, it was in this case. You know what's going to be made here in Deerfield Beach, Florida? Candy Ebling's going to give us a station break to promote another book and then some, and we'll continue the conversation. This is the Motor City Man Mouse Show. I am pleased to be joined by legendary Vice President and General Manager Fred Clare, the architect of the Los Angeles Dodgers and their championship teams. Candy's going to also ask you a question that she has, but she's going to do a station break, so we have another book out there. How's that, Fred? Go ahead, Candy.
You bet.
This broadcast is brought to you by the South Florida Tribune Publishing Company, which published a book last November called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by Scott Motor City Madmouth Morgan Roth. And the foreword was written by George Eichhorn. There's even a picture of Scott and Tommy in there, and Scott and Muhammad Ali, a young Scott and a young Muhammad Ali. But it talks about his 40 plus years in the industry. Go get it. You got to get your copy today. Read it. Cool stories. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple. You can also please go to our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. If you see the red subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner, please subscribe. Monday nights, we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesdays and Thursdays, we talk all kinds of sports. You never know what we're going to have. If you like to listen to podcasts, it's available wherever you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, you name it, we're there. Back to you, Scott.
All right. Well, also, you know what? We also broadcast Thursday, depending on. So, Candy's question is: in your career, what is your greatest accomplishment? Great question. I like that one.
Scott, I think I won't term it an accomplishment per se.
Okay.
I would say the greatest memories that I have are really being fortunate for 30 years to be a part of an organization with so many incredible people. The legendary players are obvious, but it's the people who worked in our scouting department, the people who worked in our player development department, the people at Dodger Stadium and in the front office. There was never a day where I drove into Dodger Stadium without thinking and knowing how blessed I was to be in the company of so many people. And I've been further blessed by being able to be connected to so many lives through those Dodger days. So it's not a moment, it's not a one, it's a collection of friendships that will remain with me for certainly and obviously all of my life.
Okay. Well, you know what? You knew this was coming. I think we talked about it before, but you don't mind talking about everything. Let's talk about your predecessor, Al Campanis. I met him, Tommy, and even Steve Brenner many years ago at the 81 Winter Meetings. But on that one fateful night on ABC News Nightline, you know, Al Campanis talked about whether African Americans could go out there and manage, and he said a lot of racial things. And I know in that interview, Ted Koppel did everything he could to try to save him from hanging himself. I remember that interview. You know how it is, Fred, sometimes, where you remember interviews as if they had happened yesterday. And this is one I'm thinking to myself, Al, okay, you've been with the organization 41 years. I'm thinking to myself, he's trying to save you from problems, okay? But on that one fateful night, what was going through your mind when Al Campanis made the comments that he did, knowing full well that the Dodgers have always been one of those organizations which has been minority friendly?
Scott, a great question. And I didn't see the interview that night for one reason. Al did not tell any of us
Really?
in the Dodger organization that he was going to be doing that interview. In fact, during the game, Steve Brenner, our publicity person, was there, and an ABC person came up and said, "Where's Mr. Campanis?" And Steve looked at him like in a question. He said, Why are you asking?" He said, "Because he's going to go on our show after the game." So what happened, Scott, and Al was a dear, dear friend, as is his son today, Jimmy, and his grandson, Jim. Al Campanis, it's the 40th anniversary of Jackie Robinson. It's 1987. Jackie broke into 1947. It's the 40th anniversary. And Ted Koppel asked a very basic question.
Right.
Mr. Campanis, why aren't there more blacks in leadership position in baseball? Al, to his, I know his greatest regret of certainly his life.
Right.
He loved baseball. He tried to defend baseball where there was no defense. And his remarks obviously spread even before the internet throughout the universe.
Right.
And Peter O'Malley, there were 3 games in Houston, and before the 3rd game, asked for Al's resignation. I'll never forget, Peter was with Al at the airport, leaving Houston to fly back to Los Angeles, opening day the next day. And Peter speaks to me, and he said 2 things. He said, "Fred, you have to take this job. It's so important to us." And then he said, "Fred, Al wants to say something to you." And Al said, I'll never forget, sadly, he said, "Fred, I wish you could have been with me last night." And I said, "Al, I wish you would have told me or someone, because I think that we could have given Al more of a nature of all the types of questions that he could be asked."
Right.
But Al, in his defense of the game, really cost him his job with the Dodgers. And Al knew it that night. It's been written that he went back to the hotel, and there was Vin Scully. And Al said to Vinny, they'd once roomed together on a trip to Japan or some trip. He said, "Roomie, I think I really made a huge mistake tonight." And indeed, he had. So a very sad chapter. But Al went on. He did what he could in terms of trying to be helpful in the cause of diversity. But it was a very sad ending to a really wonderful career in baseball.
Well, you've seen it 40
And I think the most important thing, Scott, the players who knew Al the best, this is the key. He made a huge mistake. No, it's not in question.
Right.
Don Newcomb, Sweet Lou Johnson, all of the others, Al Downing, all of the others knew Al as a person, as a baseball man, and knew the opportunities that he gave and where he tried to help so many people, including Jackie himself. It was Al who helped school Jackie at second base. It was Al who was a key part in the signing of Roberto Clemente.
Right.
So it was a sad chapter, and I feel fortunate that I maintained a friendship with his family.
Well, let's face it, I got to know him at the baseball winter meetings. He taught me something I didn't know. And let me tell you, I was only 19 years old, or just about close to 19. And I'll never forget, Scott, there's 3 ways to handle a trade: immediately, and then midterm, and then long term. And that was my first piece of baseball knowledge that he taught me. But it is too bad because he came across as a very sincere individual, and he had one bad night where unfortunately his reputation fell beneath him. But to me, it's just one of those things where he made a mistake. Unfortunately, the one thing that so many people have done is when you make a mistake, don't do it on race or minorities, because that's like, remember the game when I was playing as a kid called Hangman. I enjoyed playing that game because you lose the next game, you do the next one, but you don't do it when the stakes are that high, especially with an announcer like Ted Koppel, who's very, from what I hear, I've never met him, very sincere and does everything that he can to try to help you, but there's just no way that he could help him that night.
Very, very sad. That's a sad time.
So, all right, let's go on to a different note that recently happened. We have the Rick Whitfield game between the St. Louis Cardinals and the San Francisco Giants, and the tribute to the Negro Leagues. What were your thoughts about when that game was playing in such a historical venue like that, talking about celebrating the Negro Leagues?
I thought it was tremendous. I think that all baseball can do, and it needs to do more and continue to do more. But I think that the diversity of the game is such a important part of the history of the game, and I'm really happy to see that many of the records and the achievements of those players who played in the Negro Leagues, that they're being acknowledged more than they have in the past. Because I joined the Dodgers at a time when I understood from Roy Campanella, from Don Newcomb, from Jim Gilliam. These weren't just people who had a passing part in terms of the importance of diversity and the need for progress. They were players who came out of the Negro Leagues to achieve their positions in the major leagues. So they're very, very important. And Jackie, of course, led the way. But right there with him was Roy Campanella. Right there with him was Don Newcomb. And right there with him was Jim Gilliam. And I've been honored to do a foreword for a book on Jim that will be coming out soon. And I couldn't be happier to see more recognition given to his incredible life and incredible career. We cannot forget the past, and we cannot forget the people who have contributed to our game.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to do down the road when I get out to Kansas City again is I plan to take my wife over to the Negro Leagues Museum. I know that's a great historical place. I've taken her to the Field of Dreams, and I took her to Cooperstown. Cooperstown's a little expensive. That's what you can see around my house anyways. And I won't get into what the bottom line was, because then my hair will fall off what little there is anyways. But, it's just sad that Willie Mays, unfortunately, I think passed like 1 or 2 nights before. And I know he wanted to be at that game, but it was also great to see Reggie Jackson talk about the stories of the problems that he had.
I agree. I thought that Reggie's a friend. I thought that his comments were very appropriate. And when you talk about Willie, I've been in touch the last few days. In fact, talked to him yesterday with Joey Amalfitano, who was a teammate of Willie's and who flew from his home in Arizona to be there for the celebration of Willie's career. And Joey has many wonderful stories about Willie and when Willie first came up. And now, sadly, and we talk about the passing of time, Joey Amalfitano is the last surviving member with the passing of Willie of the 1954 world champion New York Giants.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about the Dodgers title during the COVID-19 year. Everybody's obviously locked up in 2 stadiums, Houston and Texas. How do you, obviously you win a championship no matter what it is, but what's your best interpretation of that title during that year? Nobody will ever put an asterisk on anything, but obviously it was you're going to get a championship, you do, but what are your thoughts about the COVID-19 title and how you view it and how other people view it?
It's a strange word to use, but uh, it's unfortunate in that the accomplishments of a team that won a world championship is kind of moved off to the side or has an asterisk beside it. So I guess
Right.
my feeling about it is one of feeling that those players on the Dodgers and many, many outstanding players, uh, in a way, uh, got robbed of something that should have been an enormous celebration. That they did with all the factors of COVID and the shortened season and everything else. They didn't have the celebration of of '88. They didn't have the celebration of '59, and but that's what happened. Of the Dodgers today, the I have tremendous respect for Dave Roberts, who's become a great friend through the years.
Mhm.
I think the world of Dave, and I want to see Dave win another world championship, to give him two, just as Tommy had two,
Mhm.
And I think that that will happen. I don't know if it will happen this year, but I think it will happen because the Dodgers have tremendous talent on their team, and Dave is, in my view, as capable as any manager in the major leagues. I think the world of him.
All right, I want to talk about a former manager of yours who's a good friend of mine as well, Don Mattingly. Okay. Do you think that Don Mattingly, Fred, should be in the Hall of Fame? I personally will always say yes, no matter what. Had a 13-year career and are undoubtedly one of the best hitters in the game. I know other players that have gone in there with similar stats, but Don doesn't get the recognition that he rightfully deserves. I personally think he belongs in the Hall of Fame, but I'm interviewing you. What do you think?
Well, when I guess two things. When I think of Don, I think of a Hall of Fame type person. Number one,
Oh, yeah.
I've never, strangely enough, with my career, I've never been one that has made a close study or paid attention every year who should be in, who should be not in. In general manager days, I didn't have the time to think about history. I was concerned about what we were going to do in tonight's game.
Right.
So I don't. I think Don is a Hall of Fame person, and I would certainly have no opposition to be a Hall of Fame player. Um, and the So I hope it happens for him. I don't know when that in his class when that vote comes up again as far as players who've uh, been out of the game, but I wish the best for him. I think the world of him.
Okay, and let's stay on the Hall of Fame because I know they have the Hall of Fame festivities coming up soon of people that should be in there that aren't in there. Do you think that Pete Rose will ever get in once he passes away?
I think Scott. I think Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind. And the reason I say that, I think the plaque of Pete Rose had a career
Right.
that was a Hall of Fame caliber. No one can question that. So on that plaque, the plaque is meant to record history.
Right.
Pete Rose achieved this. He also, as part of his career, was banned from the game for this.
Right.
Those are facts. We can't change the facts. It's like on your tombstone. You're born a certain year and you die the first year. Those are facts. So I have no problem. Although that the rule that Pete broke,
Mm-hmm.
believe me, is the most important rule
Mm-hmm.
in our game. It was the one rule that as a general manager, every spring, I had to be there as the rule was read to the players. And if a player missed that meeting, he had to come into my office and either I read or had someone read him that rule. You will not ever, under any circumstances, bet on the game. And I think baseball and all sports mark my words, better be paying very close attention, because with all that's happening, and
Right.
sports have aligned themselves more with gambling
Right.
than ever before in the history of sports. Professional leagues, college leagues need to be more involved, watching more closely, pay more attention, because the one thing that all of those sports have in common regarding their viability
Right.
is one word: integrity.
Right.
Don't you ever lose it, or you've lost the game.
Okay. All right. Well, boy, I'll tell you, you would be a great sidekick here in the booth. But I'm glad to have you in my booth tonight, anyways. So
Well,
let's.
when you mention the Hall of Fame, for those going to the Hall of Fame, I would advise them when they go to Cooperstown, the Hall of Fame, and a young man who I helped to mentor, I believe, he would say that. Josh Rawlwich is now the president of the Hall of Fame, formerly with the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks.
Uh-huh.
But if you're looking for an item in the Hall of Fame, you can find the 1988 World Series ball in the Hall of Fame. I don't know whether you know that or not, Scott.
I do
When
now.
the 1988 World Series ended, Rick Dempsey came up to me, gave me a big hug, reached in his back pocket, and caught the final pitch from Morel Hershiser, and said, "Fred, this ball belongs to you."
Wow.
And in receiving that ball, and then I read a story a year or two later that there was that time only one ball from the final out of the Hall of Fame. And I called my friends at the Hall of Fame, and I said, seeing that's only one ball from the final out that was there to represent that year, I said, I have a baseball. They said, yeah, we know you do, Fred. And I said, I want to donate it to the Hall of Fame so all fans can see it. And the guy asked me, Fred, do you have any idea what that ball's worth? And I said, you don't have that much money. They flew out the next day, got the ball. The ball rests in the Hall of Fame, representing that wonderful 1988 season. A incredible historic season, I think, as most baseball fans would agree.
I'll check it out. Good stuff. Okay. So anyways, as we continue a little bit of history here with Fred Claire, let's talk about the all-time home run. You know, I've always viewed, because of obviously the steroid era, and I still recognize Hank Aaron as the all-time home run king. And Barry Bonds obviously holds the record because he has more of them. Okay. But what's your interpretation about Bonds and Aaron? I know that debate is around baseball, and, you know, let's face reality, you know, there's always going to be.
I think, Scott, I hate to use the word sad when it comes to great accomplishments.
Right.
But the cloud that hangs over it is sad.
Yeah.
Because performance-enhancing drugs played a part in the history of our game. And when you take a player like Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, Barry, like Pete Rose, he was, by his accomplishments, but before anybody knew anything about performance-enhancing drugs. So I really don't get. I love the history, but it's kind of strange. But when I think about it, the history of the home run that I cherish the most, and this will really date me, but it's true, is Babe Ruth. And the more I see and learn of that career, that incredible career, and what he meant to the game. I don't know that you can take any one player in a long period of time and see a player that's so impacted the sporting world in our country.
Right. Okay. You know, that leads me, and let's go to Walter Mitchell's question. Does that mean that the steroid era should get in? I mean, you know, again, that's a question that's going to be bannered around between the different writers that are voting now versus the other ones, because obviously they change as time goes on. But, you know, and I'm going to bring up a couple of examples. You know, believe it or not, Fred, I worked with Sammy Sosa in 1987 when I was the director of public relations for the Gastonia Rangers. never thought he'd make it as much as he did, but we were actually pretty good friends. And we even know, and let's not kid ourselves, we could say we want about the steroid era, but if it weren't for McGuire and Sosa, baseball would be in trouble after that debilitating strike that took many years to recover. But let's maintain the purpose of Walt's question. Should the steroid era get in at some point?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Scott. Repeat that if you would.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. I'll repeat the question. Does that mean that steroid era should get in? And Walter says, let's be honest, drugs have been a part of every sport from players taking uppers back in the day until the PED era. If I were looking at drug use, it's open court secret that went on. So how would you go ahead?
It's part of history. It's just what I said about Pete Rose. It's part of baseball's history. It shouldn't be discarded from the books and from history. Mm-hmm. The one thing that we should, as people, as a sport, as a country, the one thing that we should be able to do is to learn from our history and benefit our history, not to try to ever deny it, not to cover it up, not to recognize people who made great achievements in the game. Sammy Sosa, a great player. Mark McGuire, I remember when he was on the Olympic team in Los Angeles. Barry Bonds, all of those players, great legendary players. And so I respect them for what they were able to do as Major League Baseball players.
All right, so tell me your thoughts about social media. We know full well, let me tell you, if they had that with Campanis going on, then it could have been way worse than it was when they didn't have it. But let's talk about social media in general. What are your thoughts about it, number one, and the powerful nature for which it can go out there and really destroy reputation? Adam Bloomstein says what's going on, Fred, so he just wants to say hello to you. So, but social media, some thoughts.
Well, I think it's not only here and now, it's going to get greater day by day. So we're going to have to learn to, when I say social media, it continues to grow. And what is really helping the growth of that is clearly artificial intelligence. So it is a part of what we do in our daily lives in every way. It has a huge impact on sports, and probably even more important, not probably, even more important, an important part in our political landscape.
Right.
So it is here, it is growing, and it is up to the people who govern in all of these areas how it's dealt with, because it's not going to go away.
Right.
And it's a huge impact in all of our lives in every single way, without question. Huge.
Right. Okay, let's talk about baseball today, Fred. Okay, we're talking about the different rule changes, the analytics. Now they're talking about robot. I'm like, please don't do that. But, you have the wider bases, the pitch clock, the 3-mound visit, the drill, the ghost runner. And Joe Madden's been very critical recently about the way the game has changed. But let's talk about what your interpretation or feelings are about baseball in its current state today with everything.
Well, many parts of it I do not like at all. This business of an extra inning starting a runner on second base is absolutely the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. If someone could give me a good reason, because there is no good reason. It is absolutely crazy. I think baseball, very frankly, reaches too far on some things to be different. I'll give you a perfect example. I thought last night, or the All-Star game, last night. The uniforms were terrible. They could not have been worse. You couldn't separate. Here's baseball trying to grow its game and grow the teams. You see these players, great young players. If you're not familiar with them, you don't know whether the guy plays for the Indians or the Dodgers or the Giants or whoever. That was absolutely terrible. And I think baseball did itself a disfavor. So the point is this. Okay, you want to improve. We want to be up to date. We want to be creative. We want to change the game. Don't lose the values of the game. And baseball is trying too hard to be different from the great game that it is, and it's not working well. So there's a lot I don't like.
Okay. Well, you've got a mega superstar at Dodger Stadium. His name is Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, this year the DH, but he obviously he's a two-way player. What are your thoughts of Shohei Ohtani?
Well, I think he's tremendous. I'm happy he's with the Dodgers, and I think that's great. Mr. Walter O'Malley was one of the pioneers in taking baseball to Japan. I had the great honor as the general manager of the Dodgers to sign the first player from Japan. There had been one years earlier, but not really of a significance or kind of a different framework. But Hideo Nomo broke the barrier. And I signed Hideo Nomo. Know that story, chapter and verse. A part of it is how he came about and how we signed him. And again, it shows the expansion of the game that Walter O'Malley always believed in and felt. And I think this will probably happen because he was the greatest visionary I was ever around. One day you will have I'm repeating his words if you would. It's not fair. One day you'll have a major league team in Mexico, and one day you'll have a major league team in Japan.
You know what? For some reason,
he said that decades before. So I think Ohtani is great, and I'm happy to see him with the Dodgers, and I'm sure the Angels are very unhappy or should be very unhappy not to have him on their team because this player, is a very pretty obvious, very significant talent.
For some reason, I knew you were going there. I just knew it. Getting to know you as long as I have for as many years, that you're going to go with an expansion. So you talk about internationally. So let me just put you out on this. Would there be any two particular areas in the United States that you would view as high potential expansion candidates? And then the follow-up to that is what are your thoughts about the A's going to Vegas? So answer the expansion question first, and then the A's going to.
I don't see an area in the United States for expansion, and I will move right into what's taking place with Oakland going to Vegas, but first playing in Sacramento. If that's not the most mixed up, craziest thing I've ever heard of, you have to tell me what parallels that. It doesn't make any sense. Right. It absolutely makes no sense. And I feel bad for the people in Oakland. And one of the wonderful Oakland executives, a dear, dear friend of mine, Andy Dolich, who's been involved with the A's for years and trying to do the best to help resolve the situation. That is an absolute mess. Again, don't stray so far in different directions that you're losing the core elements of the game. I don't think that makes any sense. But Scott, I can say that now because no one in baseball listens to me anymore anyway. So I've got the freedom to say it. I would have said it anyway. I always did, as people know. But no, we got to do better than that. We got to do better than that. We have to be better than that.
Fred, your opinions are valued. Don't underestimate that, my friend. Don't do that. But I'm going to ask you this. Would you view Nashville and Charlotte as viable expansion possibilities? Nashville and Charlotte, North Carolina.
I haven't really made enough of a study. It seems like I would go to Nashville about every 5 years for the winter meetings, so I can tell you all about the Opryland Hotel, which is big enough to host to build a stadium. I don't know. And in fairness to those communities, and I do want to be fair, I can't make that judgment. I would have to make a much deeper study. But I think the fact that we've got a team now granted permission, as I understand it, to make a move, but they can't go there now, and so they've got to go to this other site to play until that's resolved. That tells me we're not baseball. The expansion of baseball should be a much further look. The expansion of baseball should be what was in the vision of the wonderful Walter O'Malley. Might be Tokyo, might be Mexico City.
Right.
With all due respect, not Charlotte, not Nashville, not Sacramento, and not Las Vegas. Think bigger than that.
Well, you said a mouthful there. I'll tell you, when the time comes, I learn how to do reels, although I'll have other people doing it. We'll have a lot of reels off this conversation. I will say that. And I'm learning the technologies. I swear I'm doing better, but the one that helped you get on here is way better than in charge of fixing a lot of that. So with that said, okay, you say that they're not candidates, and I think Mexico and Tokyo or somewhere out there, Korea might be one too, because I know they're. What are your thoughts about the World Baseball Classic and the Olympics? Do you feel that those are excellent forms of international competition?
Yeah, I love it. I love it because we were very much involved, Scott, with international baseball. Walter O'Malley was a pioneer. Peter O'Malley made tremendous contributions. I've got a good memory. I remember 1984. Peter was the one responsible, along with Bowie and Rod Dado, to do the work to make baseball a demonstration sport in the Olympics. 1984.
I was actually at Dodger Stadium.
You can find McGuire and Bonds and others as part of all of that. Yes. We need to grow. And I couldn't have been happier with the Major League draft because the first player selected was from Australia. I remember as a very young guy going to Australia when baseball was just really getting started. And when I saw their start, I had two of our wonderful scouts, Monty Baswell and Red Adams, make a trip due to friends I made with the Australian Baseball Federation. Baseball needs to grow, and baseball needs to grow globally. And I called Craig Shipley. I haven't spoken to him yet because we signed him. I believe Craig was the first player ever signed out of Australia. Now, you have a draft with teams playing throughout this country at the high school and college level, and you have a player from Australia. That's tremendous.
Right.
Tremendous. And I've got a dear friend who helped and brought me on as an advisor, Ryan Flynn, with baseball in New Zealand. He did so much and brought over players. Baseball needs to expand, and baseball needs to expand globally. Think big.
I love that. You know, the only time I was ever at Dodger Stadium was actually in 1984 watching the Korean play. It was kind of neat, really. And so one other thing I want to do before we go back to the books and we'll call it a night. What are your thoughts about interleague play? I like it because you get to see.
It's here, Scott. It's here.
Yeah.
I've got time for one more question. And
okay.
So if you've got one last thought, because I have a wonderful wife and dinner calls. And so if you've got one last question, I will field it.
Well, I've got the last question is I want you to go ahead and talk about your book one more time and how to get it, and then we'll call it a night.
Thank you for that. The book is Extra Innings, Fred Clare's Journey to City Hope. And I'll tell you something. We've been talking about teams. We've been talking about people from baseball. This is the greatest team I've ever been a part of, City of Hope. The work that they do and the work that other, not just City of Hope, hospitals, people in need, people fighting cancer and other illnesses. And I think of Jackie's words that we mentioned earlier. A life is not important except on the impact it has on other lives. For so Scott's audience and followers, think about that. Impact other lives in a positive way. Be the best that you can be, and be the best that you can be in helping others. And you will find that that's the best thing you can do. So, Scott, it's been a pleasure to be with you. We'll do it again down the road. Now that your wonderful Candy has figured out how to get me online, we can do this again at some point not too far from here.
That sounds good. Candy just needs 20 seconds to let everybody know how they can find it real quick, and then that way that's where your book. Do you have 20 seconds? Can you spare that? 30 seconds?
You bet. Candy can tell us that it can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. All net proceeds to City of Hope.
And where our broadcast is going. Thanks, Fred. And I'm so glad you came on the Motor City Man Mouth Show. You made my day, but you've been a friend forever anyway, so friends are always friends. Go ahead, Candy. I want to make sure he gets to dinner.
So go buy his book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Kindle, Extra Innings by LA Dodgers Fred Clare, or go buy Scott's book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. They're both available on Amazon. Go get your copies today. Scott, what else would you like?
Well, that's the abbreviate. Go ahead, Candy. And this all broadcasts are being heard on iHeartRadio, as well as a lot of social media platforms as well. So, Fred, we're doing our best there to make sure the message of your book gets out. And once again, I am so thrilled that you were able to take time to join us tonight on the Motor City Man Mouth Show. So, on behalf of Fred Clare, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Man Mouth. Thank you for joining us tonight. The Sports Exchange is next. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week on the Motor City Man Mouth and Sports Exchange. Thanks again, Fred. God bless and continued health. You've been great tonight. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. And Scott, best to you and Candy. Take good care.
Yeah, best to you and your wife too, Fred. Always the best of health. All right. Thank you. Well, I hit him with topics I never visualized I can do because the thing was going so well.